No.
So it's like anxiety on steroids. So you start to worry, but then your fight or flight instincts kick in. So your lungs seize up, your palms start sweating, your mouth dries up, your heart is racing, your mind is racing. I couldn't breathe and therefore couldn't speak. So a couple seconds into reading what was supposed to be 6 stories right off of the teleprompter, I lost the capacity to speak, and I had to kind of squeak out something about, back to you, back to the main anchors.
Wow.
Yeah, it sucked uncontrollably.
Now, what caused it? Do you know?
I do. Yeah, I definitely know. It's some dumb behavior in my personal life is what caused it. I had spent a lot of time as a war reporter at ABC News. I was in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, six trips to Iraq, and I had come home from a long run. And I covered kind of the pre-invasion, invasion, and then insurgency in one kind of 6-month run. And I came home after that, and I got depressed. And I didn't actually know I was depressed, but I was having some obvious symptoms in hindsight. I was having trouble getting out of bed, felt like I had a low-grade fever all the time. And then I did something really smart, which is I started to self-medicate with cocaine and ecstasy. And even though I wasn't doing it all the time, I like to say it wasn't like that. You ever see The Wolf of Wall Street?
Yes.
Where they're popping lewds. That wasn't me. I wasn't getting high on the air or anything like that, but I was partying in my spare time because it made me feel better. So after I had the panic attack, I went to a doctor who's an expert in panic, and he started asking me a bunch of questions, try to figure out what had caused the panic attack. And one of the questions was, "Do you do drugs?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do drugs." And he leaned back in his chair and gave me a look that communicated the following sentiment: "Okay, asshole, mystery solved." And he just pointed out that, you raise the level of adrenaline in your brain artificially. You make it much more likely to have a panic attack. And I, at baseline, am a jittery little dude. So it doesn't take much to put me in that zone. You just offered me coffee, and I said no because that will freak me out.
Well, it's weird that ecstasy and cocaine was the combination, because ecstasy is something that they actually give to a lot of soldiers that have PTSD, and there's been quite a few tests on that.
Yeah, I don't actually think ecstasy was the problem.
The coke?
I think it was the coke.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. So,
but those are the 2 drugs I was mostly doing.
How often were you doing it?
I would say, there would be months where I wasn't doing it at all because I was off. I covered the 2004 presidential campaign, and I didn't have a lot of time to be, snorting coke. So, but when I was home and around my friends, on a busy week, 2-3 times a week.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. That'll do you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a comeback right now that cocaine is experiencing.
Did it ever go away?
Huh. I don't know. I've never done it.
Was there some sort of cocaine recession that it had to bounce back from?
I believe there was.
Really?
Okay. I'm talking totally ignorantly.
I've been out of the game for a long time, so
the coke game?
Yeah. I'm kind of boring now. But it feels to me like it's kind of a perennial favorite.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it went through a recession. Maybe it's just my perception.
Huh.
I had a buddy of mine when I was in high school, and his cousin was hooked on coke. And I watched while we were in high school. He started selling it, and he withered away, lost like 30 pounds or something like that. And just him and his girlfriend just hide out in the attic. They had an attic apartment. They would just hide out there and watch TV and do coke and sell coke to people. And I was like, well, fuck that drug. Like, whatever that drug's doing. Like, these people, it was almost like knowing someone who had gotten bitten by a vampire and become something different. It was very strange. So my experiences seeing people do that led me to never do it.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was not like that for me, but I could see it over the horizon. It's an incredibly addictive drug. So I think you made the right call.
Yeah, it seems it's got a little too much gravity attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, you can get hooked and it will bring you down. There are other drugs you can do. I'm not recommending drugs, but the way my friend Sam, my half brother Sam over there does.
Let me get to it. Yeah.
There are other drugs you can do that have vastly lower addictive what's the word I'm looking for here, Sam?
Characteristics?
Yes, thank you.
So how did you recover?
So I wasn't actually doing it that long. I actually had never done hard drugs until my early 30s, and when I came home from the war zones, and
that's what started it?
yeah,
You
yeah,
just
got
were freaked
depressed.
out by seeing too much?
No, it's actually it wasn't PTSD. It was I was addicted to the adrenaline. I was having.
wow.
It was not that I was traumatized. It was that I was enjoying it too much, and I would come home and the world would seem gray and boring.
Wow.
Yes, that was the problem.
Did you watch Hurt Locker? I'm sure you did, right?
Yeah,
Did that resonate with you? Like how
absolutely.
that guy-
It's been a while since I watched it, but absolutely, I want to just be clear that the experience of a journalist is so different from the experience, so much more mild than the experience of an enlisted man or woman.
Sure.
So I don't want to compare my experience to the Hurt Locker. I'm an observer on the side, and I don't even want to compare my experience to more experienced war correspondents out there. I'm thinking of like guys like Richard Engel on NBC.
Sebastian Junger.
Absolutely. I just actually sat down with him the other day he's got a new documentary coming out. My experiences are much more mild than that, but certainly enough to really get a sense of how thrilling it is. There's an expression, there's nothing more thrilling than the bullet that misses you. And in my case, luckily they all missed. That was not true for some of my friends. So I had a real sense of the stakes, but it is exciting. It's also thrilling on a idealistic level. I mean, I believe in the importance of bearing witness to the tip of the spear, to what we're doing, to what our military is doing in our name. So all of that is a heady mix.
So you knew people over there, journalists that got killed?
Oh yeah, absolutely. A very good friend of mine, the guy who actually ultimately set me up with my wife, is a guy named Bob Woodruff, who was the anchor of World News Tonight on ABC News. He had only been in the chair for about a month when he was on a trip to Iraq, and he literally got his head nearly blown off when he was on the top of an Iraqi tank. Almost died. Is an absolute miracle he's alive. There are pictures of him on the internet with basically half a head. Traumatic brain injury, was brought back to life, is to this day a walking miracle. That he's alive, and after he recovered, he then introduced me to the woman I married. So he's a close friend, and I saw cases like that, lost friends, both Iraqi friends and journalist friends. The woman I was dating at the time, when I was spending a lot of time in Iraq, she got hit by a tank shell. She was in the hotel Palestine where all the journalists were staying. She was on a balcony, and one of her colleagues was on the balcony below her. He got a direct hit and died. She carried him to the hospital, and she basically got the reverberations and still can't hear, as far as I know.
When you're a journalist and you're over in Iraq or in Afghanistan, you're in war, and what you're experiencing is so far removed from the day-to-day life that most people experience. What is it like trying to relay that to people? How difficult is it trying to? Because I think so many people have this almost dramatic television movie / view of war, where they don't ever experience it. Like I would imagine, probably 99% of the people that are in this country will never experience it.
No, and that's good.
Yeah.
No, it's I don't know that you can describe it in a way that will really give the full picture of its absurdities and horrors and long stretches of boredom punctuated by terror.
And also this other piece, which is taboo to talk about, which is the pleasure and excitement that people get fighting wars. I mean, this is Sebastian Junger's thesis as well. I mean, just the camaraderie is the most intense camaraderie they ever experience. And so that's something they come back to civilian life and are missing it, and it's part of what's so difficult about coming back.
And that's why you see a lot of risk-taking behavior among vets, because you're looking for another way to get that hit of adrenaline, for sure. There's a book, and I'm blanking on the name. It's a great book written by a much more experienced war correspondent than me. He used the phrase "war is a drug," and that to me sums it up, at least in my experience. I got hooked on the experience of being in these really elevated situations heightened situations, cinematic, dramatic situations, and I would come home and I didn't know what to do to replace it, and so this synthetic squirt of adrenaline that you can get from cocaine seemed to do it for me. Obviously, it had tremendously negative consequences, and so I wouldn't recommend it, but I see why people do this.
So how did you bounce back?
Oh, that was actually the question you asked me before that I somehow neglected to answer. So the doctor who pointed out that I was an idiot and doing drugs and it had caused the panic attack, I agreed. He didn't think I needed to go to rehab because it was pretty short lived. I was in my early 30s when I started, and I'm still in my early 30s when I had the panic attack, and so it was only a couple of years. He said, "Just I want you to come see me once or twice a week, forever."
Forever. How convenient.
He said basically indefinitely. So I still see him, but not. Yeah, it's a good business model, but not that. I mean, it's been well north of. It's been about 13 years, so I don't see him that often now. But for a long time, I saw him intensively. So that it wasn't easy. It's not easy, and I wouldn't call I mean. There are people who have had drug addictions that are vastly more severe than mine.
Right.
But it sucks to stop a habit that is giving you pleasure in pretty prominent areas of your brain.
Well, your situation, what you're talking about, is a very, very, very extreme situation. Like being a journalist, a war correspondent, going over there, experiencing that intense sort of adrenaline rush, and then having your issues with it. But it seems like there's a tremendous amount of people today that are stimulating themselves. Adderall was a big one. I mean, it's just I know I've found out recently like 4 or 5 people that I didn't know that were on Adderall. It seems like you just sort of start asking questions, and you find out how many people. I mean, my kid goes to school with a bunch of other kids, and you get to meet the parents, and like fucking half of them are on Adderall. Yeah. Like it's very weird. And Adderall is a form of amphetamine, and it seems like it just it's mind-boggling how many people are doing this stuff.
We're dosing ourselves with all sorts of things. So it can be stimulants, but it also can be benzos, cousins of Valium. It can be shopping, gambling. It can be whatever. It's Twitter.
Yeah.
And I think it's just speaking. We have a neuroscientist in the room, so I'll let him say more about this, and also a guy who's more experienced practitioner of Buddhism than I am, but it does speak to the nature of the human mind, that we're always on the hunt for the next little hit of dopamine, and now there are lots of ways to get it.
Well, it's also very bizarre that you can just do that. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a time in history where you could just take a pill and you'll be elevated for 5 or 6 hours. Yeah. I mean, and that your doctor will give you this pill and they'll encourage you to take it. And then you'll find out that 50% of the people in your community are taking it.
I've done stories about parents who steal it from the kids.
Also, just caffeine. I mean, I'm reaching for the coffee here.
Yeah.
Having slept poorly last night, but that's just as much of a drug. It's not as potent a drug as taking methamphetamine or Adderall or anything else that's a drug. But I mean, this had civilizational consequences when humanity more or less switched from alcohol in the morning to caffeine in the morning. That's just, things got a lot different. I mean, for hundreds of years, people were just drinking ale and wine in the morning before coffee and tea became huge in Europe, and colonialism, the engine of colonialism to a significant degree was coffee, tea, sugar, and our behavior changed.
People that were drinking ale and wine wasn't a big part of it. The reason why they drank it with food is because the water would get stagnant.
Yeah, well, there's the issue with clean water too. Yeah. But just imagine the consequences of you and everyone you know getting up in the morning and just starting with beer or wine.
I know people like that.
I mean, that's a long day or a very short one.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fundamental point of the underlying neuroscience is that all of these drugs, I mean, anything you're putting into your body that's modifying the behavior of your brain is only modifying the existing available neurochemistry of your brain. I mean, these molecules either get your brain to secrete more of an existing neurotransmitter, or they mimic an existing neurotransmitter binding to the same receptor site, or they keep something in play longer than it would otherwise have been. They block the reuptake of neurotransmitters or neuromodulators. So it's not, a drug is never getting your brain to do something your brain is incapable of doing, right? So, and that's the most extreme thing, like DMT or LSD. I mean, the brain is still doing all of that. And so it stands to reason that there are potentially other ways of getting the brain to do that, whether it's meditation or whether it's computer interface ultimately to the brain. I mean, the people who are interested in brain-computer interface that not only allows a quadriplegic to move a robotic arm, or gets a Parkinson's patient to be able to move, but to the ultimate degree. I mean, actually augmenting human function. That's or opening landscapes of mind, psychedelic and otherwise, that have been unexplored. I mean, all of that is, in principle, possible because, again, we're just talking about electrochemical phenomenon happening in our heads, which is just there to be modulated.
Now, when you were talking about being depressed, and Sam, you're talking about reuptake inhibitors, I want to know, what are your thoughts on the massive amount of people that are on SSRIs now? I mean, there's another thing that I know. How many people I know that have either are on or have been on some sort of antidepressants, and it seems, I mean, to me, to someone who's never taken them or doesn't have personal experience with it, massively overprescribed.
Yeah, well, I would, anything I say is with a caveat that this is, I mean, I'm not a neurologist. I have zero clinical experience, and this is certainly not my area. I'm not up on the recent literature on the efficacy of antidepressants, but there's clearly, it's like anything. There's a spectrum. There are people who have been unambiguously helped by antidepressants, and there are people who are on them who shouldn't be on them. And there are people who are on them who want to get off them and find it surprisingly difficult to get off them. And so these are blunt instruments by definition, because it's anything that's modulating serotonin, in this case, is effective everywhere serotonin is effective, and it's there's no magical property of finding the neuromodulator where only the symptoms you want to relieve are affected, because these chemicals do a lot of things in a lot of places. I mean, even in your gut, right? So it's not, so that hence the side effects you get with almost any medication. And we would have to get, it would be, in many respects, as a matter of luck, to find a pharmacological target that actually does just what you want it to do, which is to say that those receptors are not elsewhere that are going to produce side effects for you. So that's why a different kind of intervention, something like ultimately some electrical or magnetic or machine-based intervention could be more targeted, because then you're not just putting something in the bloodstream that spreads everywhere.
By machine-based, you mean something like electrodes that they put on the mind or the surface of the head to stimulate areas of the brain? Yeah. And again, what we have now is also still pretty primitive, and anything that you would have that would be super futuristic would seem to require that you put something actually inside your head, right? So whether that's neurosurgery or putting something into the bloodstream that somehow gets inside your head, an injectable. So, for instance, Elon Musk just mentioned something which he called neural lace, which is, I believe, a term that came from a sci-fi novel. I don't think it originates with him. I'm not a big science fiction reader, but he's got he announced investment in a company called Neuralink,
which is looking at some advanced brain-computer interface, based on the idea that you could get with these new microelectrodes, you can get an injectable mesh, like a wire mesh that just integrates with the brain, or very likely just the cortex. And I believe this work has already been done in mice, and the mice have survived and are living with this mesh in their brains. And again, this is not research I'm close to at all. And he just announced this a couple of weeks ago. But in principle, yeah, you're talking about having, whether it's a mesh or whether it's magnetoelectric particles. I mean, something that is on site around individual neurons or assemblages of neurons, which can both read out and input wirelessly signal from those neurons. So just both, putting your thoughts into the world by influencing effectors, robotic arms or cursors on screens or whatever it is, and also influencing your mind based on whatever inputs you want to put in there from the world, whether that's
until the Russians hack you and
exactly. Well, it opens all of those concerns.
Always the Russians. It's always the Russians.
Yeah,
Chinese there's gambling. I think the Chinese people are responsible for a lot of the propaganda that makes us think about the Russians. It's like, hey, push it off on them. Push it off on them.
I'm prepared to blame the Russians for a lot at this point.
Blame them all.
Yeah.
What a slippery slope, though, for humans becoming cyborgs. I mean, we're already some weird form of symbiote right now, carrying our cell phones like it's a baby. Like you leave your cell phone at home, like, oh my God, I forgot the baby. I mean, it's a very strange thing that we already have, and there's not a whole lot of steps between that and Snapchat glasses. Jamie's got the Snapchat glasses. Have you ever seen those things?
No, I didn't know they existed.
Oh, they're very strange. They have little cameras on them, and you got it. Go ahead, throw them on. And
but now
he knows how to use them.
Google Glass just was totally stillborn, right? I mean,
it didn't work. So he's transmitting, or he's making a video right now with that left side. See how the left side is spinning?
Yeah.
It's what does Snapchat do? Like 15 seconds?
10 seconds at a time. That little counter is just flashing was like the last 3 seconds, and you can hit it again, go another 20 seconds, or you can hold it and do like 30 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, step one.
Now, is that spinning just to alert the people you're looking at that you are recording them?
I see it too, so it's on alert me too to let me know that my recording is done. Probably a little bit to let you know too, but it's probably the only notification that I'm recording.
And it just posts.
No, it doesn't post automatically, and now I have to link it to my phone and then post it from there.
Oh, okay.
The Google Glass thing made people very uncomfortable. I mean, I tried a very early prototype. I have a good friend of mine who was a executive at Google at the time, and she got a hold of one of the really early ones that actually had to be tethered by a cord. And, you talk to it and swipe it. And I played with it a couple of times, and we used it once at a UFC weigh-in where I put it on and I broadcast from the weigh-in. It's very, very odd, but it made people very uncomfortable. Like, you could see the difference when they saw you with that thing on. All of a sudden, there was all this apprehension that they're being recorded or transmitted but how long do we have where we're still people?
Well, long before you asked that question, our sense of privacy. I remember what it was like to be neurotic about the sound of your voice on a voicemail or on an answering machine, right?
Yeah.
Like re-recording the outgoing message and just being worried about your voice showing up in someone else's tape.
Yeah.
Right. And now we're living in this panopticon surveillance society where you just assume you're on camera virtually every moment you're in public. Although I guess people don't think about it all that much. I think the norms around privacy shift just because we get so much value from having the data ultimately.
I guess. But it just seems also like there's just this inexorable pull towards this connection that we're going to have. It just seems like if you take where we are now and sort of look at all the data points and extrapolate, it doesn't look good. It just
but it's both. It's both bad and good.
Yeah.
I mean, the fake news thing is horrible, but the ability to fact check, to be able to pick up your phone and find out what's true, has also never been better. So it's like we're both vulnerable in a way that we've never been, and we're empowered in a way that we've never been.
It's always been true about technological progress.
Yeah. It just seems like there's a certain amount of time we have left before we give birth to some new thing.
We're talking about just integrating ourselves biologically with our machines.
Yeah. And also something that's independent of us. Some artificial intelligence independent of us.
Well, you want to look for some fear around that, you got the right guy right here.
Well, we've talked about it
I've
in
expressed
depth.
those fears here,
Yeah. I mean, and Josh Zepps freaked me out this morning, sent me some articles about these self-driving trucks that are already going in Australia that are as big as a 767, and they're driving down the road by themselves with cargo, probably nuclear waste or something, just tooling down the road.
But people are so bad at driving that the robots just have to get reliably better than people, and then you'll just feel nothing but relief.
They probably already are.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think they probably are. As far as I know from what I hear from Tesla, the man hours they have of people using the autopilot, and the autopilot's not at all perfect. Obviously, 2 people have died already from using it badly, but still they have something like some millions of man hours of autopilot assisted driving, and I think that has been safer than just pure ape.
Did you see the video of the guy who fell asleep in traffic in San Francisco? He's literally out cold and his car's driving him on the highway.
No.
It's kind of fantastic. Yeah. I mean, he's just some guy on his way to work, just passed out completely, mouth open, and people are filming him while his car's driving down the road.
Yeah, and actually probably the people filming him are doing the more dangerous thing.
You're right, yeah.
Well, texting and driving drives me crazy. To see it, like to be in an Uber now, you can look around, you can see how many people are texting.
Yeah, including your driver sometimes.
Yeah,
that drives me crazy. Here's a guy.
Oh yeah,
that dude's out cold. His car's creeping along and stop and go traffic, and he is completely out cold.
Wow.
Well, it works. The autopilot works.
Yeah, no, it does work. Texting and driving scares the shit out of me. That Pokemon Go thing, thank God that died off. But
it stopped, yeah.
I was driving on the highway, and there was a woman to the left of us, and I noticed that her face was illuminated by her cell phone. So I look over, and she's playing Pokemon as she's driving. So I guess, I don't know how Pokemon works, but I guess you pick up things, and as you're driving, you can get stuff. And so she was playing the game while she was on the highway, barely paying attention to the road, looking at her phone.
This is the argument for robot drivers.
Yeah.
And also it will open up when you are ultimately being driven safely by a car that you trust more than you trust yourself. Then just imagine the information consumption, entertainment options that open up there. You'll watch movies, you'll listen to podcasts, you'll get work done, and it'll become a space of we're not going to miss having to pay attention to the road. Maybe some people will want to drive recreationally for some reason, but it will just be a new space where you won't believe that 40,000 people every year were dying because we couldn't figure out how to drive safely.
But isn't that a slippery slope? Like 40,000. Oh, that's a great thing that 40,000 people are not going to die. But the idea that you're going to stop people from driving a car,
you're going to have to live with these 40,000 people.
That's not what I was going to say. But I was going to say, I mean, pretty much all the things that people do, and then it's going to get down to why have people. I mean, ultimately, that's when I look at the event horizon of artificial intelligence, it's why. Why would we're so flawed. We're not going to get our shit together by the time artificial intelligence is given birth to.
Well, that all goes to what we build. I mean, if we build artificial intelligence that is independent of us and seems conscious and is more powerful than us, well, then we have built in the limit, we have essentially built a god that we now have to be in relationship to, and hopefully that's works out well for us. And it's very easy to see how it might not. I think there are even scarier cases than that, though. We could build something that has godlike power, but there's no reason to think it's conscious. It's no more conscious than our current computers, which is to say that intelligence and consciousness may be separable phenomena. That intelligence can scale, but consciousness need not come along for the ride. And that, for me, is the worst case scenario, because if we inherit all of the danger of the power of this system being misaligned with our interests. We could build something that's godlike in its power, and yet we could essentially be canceling the prospects of the evolution of consciousness, because if this thing wipes us out, I think it's Nick Bostrom, the philosopher who wrote a great book on this entitled Superintelligence. I think he calls this the Disneyland without children. I mean, basically we could build this incredibly powerful, intelligent landscape that continues to refine itself and its own powers in who knows what ways perhaps that are unimaginable to us, and yet the lights aren't on. There's nothing that it's like to be this machine or system of machines. In the way that there's probably nothing that it's like to be the internet right now. You think of all that's going on the internet. I don't think the internet is conscious of any of it right now. The question is, could the internet become conscious of what it's thinking? And I think there's no reason to think it couldn't. It's just we don't understand the physical basis of consciousness yet.
The real question is, why would it do anything? I mean, if it doesn't have any of the biological motivations that people have to breed and to stay alive and to, fight or flight and to be nervous and to